Headline News.
Let's bring in Albert Breer, Monday morning quarterback, senior NFL report. I will say, I said this yesterday, these Hard Knock shows, I think a lot of it's playing to the television. But about every episode, there'll be a moment, and I've said this before, if you put a camera in my house with my wife and I knew I was being taped, at some point, I'd forget about it. And so you do get these moments in Hard Knocks where it's like, I think they forgot the camera was on. That whole Mara, Saquon Barkley, Joe Shane, I mean, I don't think it's been a great look for the Giants. Am I being hypercritical? What have you made of the Hard Knock stuff with them?
I think this is a good sign of how we're reaching an all-access tipping point when it comes to these sorts of shows, just because they've been everywhere forever now. And so much is being asked of these teams, whether it's their in-house people, it's the NFL Films people. And there's a totally different dynamic that enters when you're talking about doing this in the off season, whether it's this series or the Roku series that had the draft for the Rams and the Commanders and the Cardinals and the Bears. It introduces a whole bunch of new dynamics. When you're doing it during training camp, Colin, it's very self-contained.
Yeah.
For the most part, the prominent players who are on that show are going to be on your team. You're not really involving other teams quite as much. The game footage is pretty vanilla. When you're doing the off season, it's totally different. And so there are all these people involved in it that maybe didn't sign up to be a part of it. And so you see some things that are a little bit different. And so I think as the NFL has continued to ask more and more and more of these teams, it's just, become tougher and tougher and tougher for films to play between the lines, which I think has affected the relationship between films and the teams. And so it's going to be interesting to see where it goes from here, because I can tell you for a fact, there are a lot of teams that are watching this right now and saying, yeah, we'll never sign up for that.
Yeah. I saw a story, not to go New York centric, but I did see a story the other day where the Aaron Rodgers was given a heads up that they were considering bringing in Arthur Smith to help Nathaniel Hackett call plays. And I thought, that's not good. That's not great. If you look at the Jets season, I think two things will become very, very important. We know they have a good defense, but defenses don't win the Super Bowl. You got to score points. The growth of their offensive line, left tackle specifically, the health of left tackle, a rookie, that'll be key. And the other thing will be, if Aaron loses some games they should win, Nat Hackett's getting the heat. It's not going to be Aaron. Yeah. A year ago, I thought Hackett, Saleh, Aaron, kumbaya. I don't feel like that now. Is that me, or what is the relationship going there now?
I think there's a good amount of trust still. And I think they're in a fine place. Now, is it more volatile than it was a year ago? Probably, just because now a year is gone, and there's always a sense of urgency that they need to win now because of Aaron Rodgers' age, because of the makeup of the roster. But that's ratcheted up even another level. And certainly Nathaniel Hackett is a part of that. Now, what I would tell you is part of the reason they were looking at other assistants is because Robert Saleh has always wanted to have a certain number of people in that quarterback room. And he was looking to add a coach to the quarterback room because they were one short at the start of the offseason. And the question was, were we going to do it with a high-level assistant or a low-level assistant? And they did look at the idea of putting a high-level assistant in there in the quarterback room with Aaron Rodgers, which would have, obviously, I think not only added to the play calling dynamic, but also, created a situation where if Nathaniel Hackett has a couple tough games, well, then everybody's going to be saying, let's just go with the other guy.
Yeah.
But the relationship between Rodgers and Hackett is still strong. I think the relationship between Rodgers and Saleh is still where it needs to be. They worked through the whole Egypt thing now that it's out there where he is, and you don't have to dance around it anymore. And I do think the other thing you mentioned is a big part of this too. They really believe the offensive line is going to be a lot better. And one reason why, and not a lot of people have talked about this, they're over the moon with what they've seen from Olu Fashanu, their first-round pick so far.
Yeah.
So even if they do have injuries, and they have two older guys there at tackle, Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses, they believe they've got a future Pro Bowl player and Olu Fashanu on the roster, coming in as the 11th overall pick from Penn State. So they feel a lot better about their offensive line. And again, like, I think the attitude there is, and this is going to be kind of a crass way of saying it, Colin, right? Like, but if we win, the whole thing is going to take care of itself.
Yeah.
And if we lose, we're probably all gone anyway.
Yeah. So I'm getting a little Brandon Ayuk fatigue, but where there's smoke, there is often fire. I do think you could get a first-round pick for him. I think if one of their two young receivers they drafted hit, you've got McCaffrey, Kittle, Jennings, Debo, a young rookie. They could move him if it got noisy. I think he's really, really good, but I think it's a Kyle Shanahan, Christian McCaffrey, Debo-led offense. That's what I think. That's the engine to this offense. Yeah. Ayuk is some icing on the cake, but I do think they could move him. Again, if one of the rookies hits, and I saw both of them play in college, the kid, the fourth-round pick, maybe better than the first round, but they can both play. If you don't think he's going to get moved, what would be the impetus? Do you think there's a possibility they just get tired of this, it's distracting, and they do move him?
Well, I think we have to look at their history too. Right, Colin? So go back 2 years. What happened with Debo Samuel? At this point in the calendar, that thing was probably worse than this is right now. And if you remember, the narrative at the time was Debo Samuel does not want to play running back, right? This is not about money. It's about the wear and tear in his body. He doesn't want to carry the ball that way anymore, period, end of story. Well, what winds up happening? He signs a contract, and this is amazing. This is the amazing thing. 2 years later, the last 2 years, he's carried the ball more times on average per game than he did in 2022.
Wow.
When he was or in 2021, when he was upset about his role, right? So they worked their way through that one. The Nick Bosa thing lasted all summer last year. I'm bringing these things up because they've weathered the storm before. And this is a really important year for them. They're going to have to pay Brock Purdy after this year. The dynamic from a cap standpoint is going to change. They've got this bottleneck of big contracts. In a lot of ways, for this iteration of the Niners, this could be it. They may have to retool a little bit after this year. And so they really want to make a run at winning a championship this year. And Brandon Ayuk's a huge part of that. On top of that, I think if it were up to them and you ask anybody there who they would rather trade, Brandon Ayuk or Debo Samuel, I think 10 people out of 10 there would say to you, we trade Samuel and we sign Ayuk. And the reason why is because they view Ayuk as a number one receiver for the long term for Brandon Ayuk, for Brock Purdy. So they believe that Ayuk can be the guy there long term. Kittle's older, McCaffrey's older, Debo's beat up. Ayuk is a guy you can look at and say, this is a guy that the next iteration of the Niners can be built around. So both for today and for tomorrow, doing everything he can to keep Brandon Ayuk makes sense. And their history shows us, again, that they've been willing to weather the storm with these things. They did it both of the last summers. I think they'll do it again this summer.
I know this is looking way out through the windshield, but somebody I trust, and I've seen it reported, said, Belichick's going to do this media thing, and he can trot out on these shows and be fine. He wants the coach. This is a coach. To the very Parcells tried TV. He's a coach. And that this is a one-year media thing. I'm sure Bill will be fine. But is there an argument? I saw the documentary on Belichick and the Giants, and I saw Bill publicly get emotional. I've never seen that. Like, the Giants touch his heart, not just his head, right? And I think to myself, is it possible that Dallas, Philadelphia, and the Giants are the three if he came back, those are the three teams?
Yeah, and you know what? It's like sort of a zero-sum game too, isn't it? Like somebody has to finish third in that division. Somebody has to finish fourth in that division.
That's right.
So I think a lot of our attention is going to be pointed right there, at the NFC East when it comes to Bill. And I think as Bill goes through this, he's going to become more likable. And people are going to remember his record over 24 years and not just what happened in 2023. So, I think as he becomes more likable and people start to look at the big picture, he's going to become more appealing. I think this happens in a lot of cases like this. And then you look at those teams in the NFC East, right? Well, Philadelphia, my belief is if Nick Sirianni had been gone after last year, that either Mike Vrabel or Bill Belichick would be the coach of the Eagles right now. The Giants, obviously, there's a lot of pressure on those guys to win, and there's the natural connections that you mentioned with the Mara family. Bill still got a very close relationship with John Mara. And then there's the Cowboys, which would have the Parcells dynamic, right? Like the idea of one-upping his old boss and being able to win in Dallas, and the relationship that he's got with the Joneses, which has gotten closer and closer over the years. So I think Bill's desire right now is still to coach. And I think there will be opportunity for him after the year. I think you're right to look at the NFC East. I think that's what we'll be looking at over the course of this year. Because again, somebody has to finish in third, somebody has to finish in fourth in that division. And I think what's going to be interesting is just kind of to follow how Bill feels about it, and how that evolves over the course of the year. Because we have seen it before where, Bill Cowherd, John Gruden, where guys have gotten into media and they get comfortable with a little bit of an easier life. And it's like, I don't know if I want to jump back in so fast. So, that's the part of it that's unpredictable. But I think as of right now, his intention is to coach. And I think there's a decent chance he winds up in the NFC East next year.
That's just crazy. We root for good stories. That would be be great stories. Albert Breer, it is great as always, my friend, seeing you. Thanks, man.
All right. Thanks, Colin.
Hi, everybody. It's me, Uncle Colin. Subscribe here to get the latest from the herd, including exclusive behind-the-scenes videos and more, wherever you may be, however you may be watching. Thanks again for making us part of your day.